Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and happy new year, wherever you are in the world, dear listeners. This is Toby Usnik back again in the new year, 2021, with the Caring Economy. Today, I have as a special guest Joe Grover, who is a pal for many years and the founder of Grover Watson Consulting. She specializes in leadership development for both individuals and teams. And we thought it'd be fun today, in the spirit of the new year and resolutions, to talk a little bit about leadership development and responsible business practices as they relate to resolutions. So, welcome to the Caring Economy, Joe Grover.
Oh, thank you, Toby. I am delighted to be here. I am a big fan of yours. And way back when, you inspired me to do a triathlon. So you will always be known for that. And just following you in your career, it's a real honor to be with you today
Well,
on this
thank
New Year's Day.
I think I've tied up my running shoes for now, but I still get my walks in each day. Similarly, I've always admired you for your athleticism, particularly with sailing and now you're boarding and you just always look so fantastic. So, vanities aside, again, welcome
Thank
and
you.
happy New Year. Joe, tell us a little bit about your career journey and how you got where you did today. Life is filled with pivots and you can tack left or tack right at a certain point, using your sailing metaphors there. So start with your early days and give our listeners a little bit of a ride on your journey.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I love all the seafaring metaphors and the nautical metaphors. Starting in childhood, I'm one of five kids. Grew up in a family business. The business was boats, and my dad is a boat builder. So from a really early age, I learned about sacrificing for the business, for the team, and and also finding my own way. So the family business was powerboats. And from a very early age, I said, I want a sailboat. And I remember like saying that, and everyone at the dinner table like stopped and looked at me like I was an alien. And my father and mother, they gave me my first sailboat at 9 years old. And but nobody knew how to sail. So I remember running out to the dock and looking at it. And I said to my dad, I love it, but I don't know how to sail. And he said, yes, you do. You just don't know it yet.
Mm.
And that's the way in which every problems were approached in my family. There was a term called Groverized, and that meant like you were usually in some situation where there was no manual. You just had to figure it out. And I'm very grateful for that. And so my career took me on this trajectory of studying communications and PR at the Newhouse School at Syracuse University, graduating and feeling kind of lost, like many of us and many young people are feeling today.
Many of our listeners,
And I wanted to save the world. Pardon?
yet many of our listeners on the Caring Economy are that young college person who's thinking about career and where to go. So I'm sorry, carry on.
Oh yeah. So I really had this moment of just I had all these big ideas. I remember coming home from college and my hometown just seemed so small and like a mess. And there were different politics than I had. And I said, I want to do something bigger. And my father, he was kind of a larger than life character. He said, why don't you start in your own backyard? And he took me out I was very concerned about the environment. Growing up on the water, I had this deep respect for nature. And there was just so much pollution where I lived. And he said, let's go out to an island that wasn't far from where we lived. And we're going to start cleaning it up. And, I listened, but I listened like sort of like with this teenage kind of like, dad, like, you don't know what you're talking about. And we went out and we came across a seagull that was basically struggling in one of those plastic like 6-pack rings, and it died in my arms. And my father and I looked. I remember looking at him like, "Did you set this up?" But it led me to start an environmental group in my hometown, and it was very politically divided town, racially divided. But in that first summer, I recruited the Grumman Care Cats, and they had a lot of employees who they liked doing community service. So we had 1,000 volunteers, many of them from Grumman.
So
Cleaned
Joanne,
up the islands, we cleaned up the waterways. Yeah.
just so our listeners understand, so now we're talking about you grew up in Freeport on Long Island in New York. Grumman is a huge
Hmm.
manufacturer there,
That's
and
right.
you actually reached out to their core of employee volunteers. Is that it?
Well, I guess the real story is like I set up a table, and it was at a nautical festival, and somebody walking by happened to be a Grumman care cat. She coordinated all their volunteer opportunities. So
Mm,
she signed up. It was like the right place at the right time. And she said, I have a few hundred volunteers. What can we do?
mm,
And we figured it out together. And and that led to, it's still going, Toby. And what's so beautiful about that is that, like, I go home now. My dad's 93, my mom's 89, and I look out like my bedroom window, which looks out over the water, and it's never been cleaner.
wow.
And it's such a lesson to me to begin in your own backyard. After that, I went to social work school, and I worked with individuals suffering with primarily anxiety. I was known as the anxiety doctor. And I was really good at it, but I realized it was just one person at a time.
Mhm,
And now I'm just called to do something much bigger, which is working with companies, working with teams. Um, and it's a coaching approach rather than a therapy approach. And it's very aligned with the sort of things that you do, really going deeper, looking at values,
mhm,
you know, tending to the mind and the body. And, you know, it's just, it changed everything for me. Also, being part of a team.
mhm.
I am lucky enough to work with really talented researchers and a methodology called functional imagery training. And we tap into imagination.
Yeah. So
And I can talk some more about that later.
yeah, please, ladies and gentlemen, again, we're with Joe Grover, who's the founder of Grover Watson Consulting. She works with leadership development for both individuals and teams, really around the world. I think the FIT training you're talking about, that, if I recall correctly, comes out of London. Joanne, is that right? Can you tell us a little bit more about the training?
Sure, it comes out of Plymouth in the United Kingdom.
Hmm.
And I was doing some research. I had a bad accident. I'm often pushing the limits to, and I was competing in an equestrian arena in the jumpers, and I had a pretty terrible accident. And in that moment of falling, I didn't know if I'd walk again. I didn't know if I was going to live or die. It was one of those like serious moments of um, having to dig deep to get through the pain of two surgeries and multiple pins and plates in my arm. And I was really struggling for like, how do we get through? How do we change people, including myself? I really wanted to start with me. And I found this program. Nobody really knew about it, but the research was based on 20 years. And for the first time, they were opening it to an international audience. And I became the first person in the US to be trained in it. And basically, it's different than anything I've ever done before. So, as a therapist, I would often deal with people's thoughts. I worked in a cognitive space. With functional imagery training, we work with imagery and imagination that taps into emotion, and emotion changes behavior. So I'm going to give you a sample of it, Toby, and your listeners, because it's hard to describe, but
Hmm.
it's beautifully, the simplicity of it is key. And also, it comes at a time when our imagination takes place in a part of our brain called the hippocampus,
Hmm.
and in part, and the hippocampus is really under attack under stress. It recedes, and we become, much more concerned about our own survival.
Hmm.
And we see spikes in anxiety and fear-based reactions. So I see this as part of a global healing. I'd love to have a global day of imagery,
Hmm.
of just imagining something different, because something very powerful happens and it leads to not only weight loss and physical fitness, it leads to gain.
I'm sorry, you broke up there. Could you say again? It leads to weight loss and what else?
Oh, I said it leads to weight loss. So FIT led to the most significant weight loss study ever conducted.
Hmm.
And this time of year, we see so many companies preying upon people. The number one thing people look up this time of year is, related to weight loss.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of, promises of pills and shakes and just do this or just do that. But the great thing about FIT is we don't ever tell someone what to do. We just tap into their values. We tap into something deeper. We tap into their imagination. And that's where the change happens. That's where the narrative happens.
Mhm.
So it's a deeper level. It's not just, I'm going to give up this or that, but we really tap into what is that going to be like? When
Mhm.
you close your eyes and you imagine yourself there, what is that experience like? And the vividness of it. So if we were to do a brain scan of somebody who's really practicing FIT, we would see almost as if they're doing what they're imagining doing.
Hmm. I think that I've heard of similar is this possible that this relates to some of the state of coaching right now for athletics, collegiate athletics and the like?
It's very similar. So visualization has been around for a very long time, since the 4-minute mile was broken. And athletes have used it for years. I've interviewed a number of athletes like Martina Navratilova and great equestrians like Ann Kaczynski. They all talk about this ability to see it before you're actually in that competition
Hmm.
and to mentally rehearse it.
Mhm.
So it does call upon those principles, but we do it in a very structured way
Mhm.
so that it becomes part of your routine, like brushing your teeth.
So is I know we have a little bit of a time delay here in the studio today, Joanna, but is there an example we might have some fun with our listeners today to share?
Oh yeah, so I'll give you an example, and then I'd also love to give a experience, an experiential um, opportunity for your listeners.
Please go right ahead, please. Joanna. Hello, Joanna.
And he started with the goal of he wanted to have an 80
Sorry to
in his golf game, a score. Yeah,
Joanna, sorry, but I lost you on my end of the audio just as you were about to start to share your examples and experiential. So I'll edit this, but can I ask you to start? It's a natural break, thankfully.
sure.
Okay. Sure, happy to share some examples. All right. So five,
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Please go ahead, Joanna.
Thank you. So I know that Charlie won't mind me using his name because he's going to be in our book, but Charles Alvarez, or Charlie as he's known, is a young CEO of Stratus. They used to be called Stratus Neuro. And he is the first CEO to try this functional imagery training. And to make it very tangible, we always start with something like a hobby. His particular thing was golf. He wanted to win this golf tournament that he and his college buddies have had, and he hadn't won in 5 years, and he didn't really have the time to play a lot of golf with being a CEO. So he used functional imagery training to improve his golf swing. So not only did he wind up after 6 sessions winning his golf tournament, he the other day he called me. He shot the best golf game he's ever had, which was a 79, and he won another tournament. But it's also changed the way that he leads his company. it's changed the way that he, on a daily, but also on teams, and his own accountability, and the accountability of the executives and the even the sales team, everybody. He's gonna start using this. So it's just a great example of, it may start with like a golf swing, but once you realize the power of mental rehearsal, the power of tapping into motivation and imagination, you change way more than your golf game.
Hmm. And I would imagine you're
So
also,
I
spirit of the caring economy, you're changing the person for the better. You're not just thinking them as a cog in your business wheel, but you're actually helping them become more holistic, more sort of grounded in their own ways of functioning and contributing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just when Charlie happens to be a neighbor of mine, but people have just noticed that he's calmer,
Mm.
right? Because there's something that happens when you can call it meditation, you can call it mindfulness, but when we just go to a quiet place inside and we tap into why we're doing what we're doing, um, and we start to see, one of the things that's unique about our approach is it's not just like think positive or imagine it going well. We also have fit clients imagine things going sideways. Imagine your greatest challenge and how will you deal with that in the moment.
So
So
Joanne,
by the time you get there, yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead. By the time you get there.
by the time you get there, it's as if you've already played that game. You've already given that speech.
So for our listeners who are, we go one of two ways. If we have a listener who is, because of COVID, perhaps say out of work, looking for a job in the new year, or we have a listener who is trying to lose that COVID-19. Pick either example, but is
Mhm.
there a way you might, um, in a brief way, describe how fit could help that person?
Sure. So it's New Year's Day, right? And we all have this sort of tradition of having a New Year's resolution or two. So what I'd like you to do, Toby, and what I invite your listeners to do
Hmm.
is to think of that resolution, the priority on your list, because perhaps there's more than one. But I just want you to take a second to pick the one that's your priority.
Hmm. Okay.
Okay.
Should I share it with the
So
audience?
now I'm going to now for now I'm just going to have you keep it internal.
Thanks.
Okay. But I do want you to imagine, and when you imagine, some people like to close their eyes. You don't have to. You can kind of daydream and stare off in the distance if you'd like.
Hmm.
But I want you to imagine that it's February 12th, 2021. It's the Chinese New Year. And you've had this intention of working on this resolution. And you started out really well, but life got in the way. Some things got in the way. So you didn't achieve what you set out to achieve. So you imagine waking up in the morning, your feet touch the ground as you get out of bed. And what does that feel like? What sort of things do you tell yourself?
Hmm. I can go negative
And
or
as you go
positive.
through your morning,
Yeah, you can go, I didn't
as
get
you
it.
go through your day, yeah, you didn't get it. As you go through your day, how does that impact your mood,
Hmm.
your relationship with the people around you? What
Hmm.
does your body feel like? You're just using all of your senses to be in that moment.
Hmm. And being aware of it.
Okay, so now I'm gonna ask you to come out of that experience.
Hmm. Okay.
And now we're going to go into a different experience. Okay.
Yep.
So, same date, it's February 12th, 2021. Get out of bed, your feet touch the floor, and you have been chipping away. You've set a goal and you work at it, even though obstacles come up and challenges.
Hmm.
But you've set the time aside, you've made it a priority. How does that feel?
Awesome.
to stay in that experience,
Hmm.
using all of your senses. What sort of things do you, when you look in the mirror or when you get dressed, how does that feel?
Hmm.
As you go about your day, how's your mood? You're just noticing as if it's happening right now.
Hmm. And the whole
So
knock-on
now,
effect.
have you come out of that experience?
Hmm.
So, if you don't mind, Toby, just sharing, what was that like for you?
It was reflexive almost and familiar, I have to say. I don't mind sharing my sort of wish or resolution was to stay fit because I'm starting a new venture and I don't want to let my workout, so to speak, slip. I thrive on exercise. And I believe
Hmm.
based on past transitions in life, I'll be able to do it. But between the pre and the post, I was able to envision both with my feet on the ground. And as you noted, I know if I don't get my exercise in each day, it carries on in my mood and how I interact with others, my own self-image and so forth. So um, certainly the second option was more inspiring and achievable, quite frankly, because I've done it before. I just need to
Hmm.
take stock in it. Sort of like your dad
Right.
saying, yes, you know it. You just don't know it yet.
Yeah. Um, so, what you just experienced and what your listeners just experienced, what is part of fit, and it's mental contrasting. So, the mind cannot hold two opposing images at one time.
Hmm.
So, the one you choose to focus on is the one that you will, in a sense, manifest.
Got it.
And when we tap into emotion, so when I lead someone through this experience and they share, the first time when they don't reach their goal, and it's usually around fitness or health or weight loss, they feel this not just a heaviness, but it's this emotional kind of disappointment.
Hmm.
And when they go through it in the second, they experience this, lightness. They experience a sense of satisfaction. So it is a matter of choice. In fact, the title of the book that we're writing is The Choice Point. So we have this choice.
So
And when things get difficult, which image are you going to hold on to? The self-defeating one, or the one where you know that there's been struggle, but you've gotten there?
yeah, or even more basically, can we take to a conscious level that we have a say in this? We have a choice, and we're making a choice consciously or subconsciously, and thereby, if I understand correctly, then you have a better chance of achieving your resolution. Ladies and gentlemen, again, we're with Joe Grover today. She's the founder of Grover Watson Consulting. She specializes in leadership development for individuals and teams. We've just gone through a fun little exercise here in the spirit of New Year's resolutions on today, New Year's Day, January 1st, 2021. Joanna, for our listeners who want to check in with you, get to know more about the FIT program, or when your book is published, what's the best way? Can you give us a URL or a hashtag for you?
Sure, it's groverwatson.com. And they're welcome to, there's a fun exercise in the homepage where they get to see precisely the power of imagination.
Mhm. Great. Joanna, I want to ask another question. Going back, your father really inspires me from what you've shared about him. He sounds like an awesome man. Um, Mentors, we've all had them. They've all helped us get where we've
Mm,
gotten in life. We do mentoring ourselves. Can you talk a little bit about the role of mentorship in your life, your journey, and who you're mentoring now, perhaps?
sure. Um, I've had so many amazing mentors, starting in college, and before that, my parents, obviously, my dad, um, and they change everything. I remember when I had broken my arm and my shoulder so badly. And like you, I'm very identified as an athlete, and it's hard. It's hard to be laid up. It's hard to not be able to run, to swim, to do all these things that de-stress me. And one of my mentors just had me do this experience where it was at the Harvard Institute of Coaching, and my mentor's name is David Drake, and we had to lean up against someone back to back and share. You know, he asked us some questions, and I remember feeling so vulnerable in that moment because I was paired with a rather large guy, and I was really afraid that he was going to re-injure my shoulder by leaning too hard.
Mm,
And it was that experience of being in that space with a stranger who really, he could feel when I was tense. He could feel when I was, and it was simply being seen. And there are these moments with mentors where we're seen, where we're not in it alone.
mhm.
And it makes a huge difference. I was involved for years with the Posse Foundation
Oh, yes, I know.
and have mentored a bunch of, many scholars who just, I think I'm mentoring me, but really I get just as much out of it. I learned so much
Mhm,
about resiliency and grit.
mm,
And now I feel like the Jonathan Rhodes, who's a researcher from the United Kingdom, working with functional imagery training with elite athletes and forces in the military. We mentor one another because he comes at it as a psychologist, data driven, and I come at life as from an emotional perspective, as a therapist, as a coach, and together the blend is a beautiful thing. So, and even my kids, two sons who are young adults, and we're always mentoring, but sometimes our kids mentor us too.
absolutely.
So I think mentoring is a huge part. One of my clients is at IBM and has started this amazing. It hasn't been officially launched yet, but it's this great vision for mentoring,
Mm,
not just in IBM, but in New York and beyond. And I think that's such a key, especially now when there's an epidemic of loneliness.
mhm,
It's really important
mm,
that we have, that we can be vulnerable, that we can be back to back with someone,
mhm.
or eye to eye, and allow ourselves to really talk about what's going on and to move on from from that place of awareness. Then we can grow.
Yes, I think that segues the sort of last area I wanted to touch on with you is just in current affairs. We've got Black Lives Matter and George Floyd's murder and COVID-19, climate changes and political drama. And yet, I think it's for me anyway. It's very much about being aware who we are ourselves, but then also that empathetic listening, that tuning in to the other, like you said, from mentoring, how just listening is such an important trait to try and develop. And I'm trying regularly. Conversations through this sort of podcast help me to do that. And just being in great company with people like you. We had Susan Rockefeller on earlier this week talking about it all. Um, I think we need to remind each other about how fortunate we are and that we have the ability and I think the responsibility to serve others by listening and by engaging and sharing as we are here today. But can you comment a little bit for yourself about that in terms of empathy and current affairs? Pick any topic: politics, George Floyd, COVID. There's a lot of them.
Yeah. It's like, where do we begin?
Mm,
I'll begin. For me, it's always been about the air we breathe and the water environment, which I think is linked to so many of these things.
mhm,
It's you know it crosses racial divides, and it crosses just about every line. We all have to breathe, um,
mhm,
and we all have to be able to have potable water.
mhm,
Um, so I think that there's this. I think that listening is sort of a lost art. And I've talked to a number of people, really like the Posse founder, Debbie Bial, who's a MacArthur Genius Award recipient. I've asked her and so many other people, like, what do you attribute your success to? And um, you know, for the large majority, they've said being a good listener.
Mm, amazing.
But I think in order to show up and really listen, we have to take accountability for our own shortcomings and
Mhm.
our own moods and our own struggles before we can deeply listen to another.
Yep.
Um, so I think, go ahead.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I think it's in keeping with this whole conversation around resolutions and envisioning a better place for oneself and for one's community or one's business.
Yeah. And one of the, I've been working with teams. So I just worked with an amazing, very high performing team at KPMG. I've worked with high performing teams at the U.S. Department of State. And sometimes there are tensions, and you can have a group of people and they all are working toward the same goal, but they have different styles of doing so, and sometimes those styles create tension, right? And what the group loses sometimes is a group of psychological safety,
Mm,
and that is key to high performing groups.
mm,
So that was came out of the Google Aristotle project, was looking at teams and what made one team perform and another team fall short. And it came down to that ability to, can you speak up? Can you risk someone, can you risk taking a chance of having a new idea
yeah,
without it being shot down?
yeah,
Um,
and
so
then
I think,
the organizations that
mhm.
inculcate that or not. Some do it with lip service. Some do it with genuine accountabilities, and it makes all the difference in I think the performance of the individuals, the employees, and the brand.
Yeah, and the leaders too. I'm amazed at how some of these very powerful, successful leaders, when we do these team sessions, they can really show their weaknesses, and it makes the team stronger. And that is a very different way of leading than perhaps like a company like IBM has led in the past, or other companies that, way back in the day, it was about kind of like, fall in line and there's a hierarchy. It's very different today.
Yeah.
And as we work from home, there are blurred boundaries, and so this sense of collaboration and this psychological safety is really key to performance, which is fascinating.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to thank our guest today, Joe Grover, who's the founder and the force behind Grover Watson Consulting. She specializes in leadership development for individuals and teams, ranging from KPMG to the State Department and high-performing athletes. Um, Joanna, tell us when your book's coming out. Is it this year, The Choice Point?
Well, I hope it's by the end of the year. That's the plan. And it's really, it's going to be a very unique experience. It's going to be a journey
Mhm.
for the reader, and it's really written for a business person.
Mhm.
What we can learn from athletes, and a lot of business people are former athletes, right? Or at least they have an appreciation. So
Mhm.
that's what we tap into.
Mhm.
But it's you know it, what we do is we put the expert in the room, or the expert is the reader,
Mhm.
right? I think that there are so many, at least in the commercial world, there are so many, just follow this step or do this tool, or and those things are generally short-lived. But this is it's like your podcast, Toby. It's a much deeper conversation.
Mhm. Well,
And go ahead.
no, no, please finish.
It's a much deeper conversation. It's tied to personal values. It's tied to why you got into this work in the first place.
Mhm.
It's tied to you know, owning our own shortcomings.
Mhm.
I do a lot of work with shadow. You know, we can all show up in best self, or we can show up in shadow, and how we make that, you know, how we own it, how we know when we're not being productive, or we know when we're being negative, or we know, and how we have to be accountable for our actions if we're going to hold other people accountable. But it's never, our work is never me telling somebody what to do. The book is not about that. It's a much deeper experience and a longer lasting effect.
Well, it's also a nice segue for one of our guests coming later in this month in the new year. I'll make sure that you meet Joe Grover, our friend, and actually interview subject for tomorrow's studio time. Mark Patrikoff, his firm Patrikoff Company, is the investment advisor to about 50 major international athletes, one of the Williams sisters, Cece Sabathia, and so forth. And we're going to talk a little bit about his business and purpose, and it'll be fun to get you two together. Maybe even another interview here on the caring economy.
I'd love that. You know, I love athletes and the kind of sacrifice that they've made to get where they are, the kind of examples that they are for the rest of us.
Yes.
And you always have interesting friends and people around you, Toby. So I'd be delighted to meet him.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, my deepest thanks to Joe Grover, pal of many years and a collaborator. We're going to do more work together, Joe. I wish you a healthy, happy New Year, you and the family. And any final thoughts for our guests here on the Caring Economy today, the first day of the new year, 2021?
Sure. I'll end with one of my favorite quotes, Viktor Frankl. It's from Man's Search for Meaning. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is your freedom. So as you set out with resolutions or your idea of the year, you know, it's to be normal that you'll be triggered, that you want to go back into old habits. But as you start to realize that there's a space between, even just 30 seconds of breathing, and you realize you have a different choice, one that ties into your values, there's tremendous freedom in that. So I'll leave you with that, and very happy New Year to you, Toby.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Joe Grover. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back next week with the Caring Economy with me, Toby Usnik.